From I Am Interchange, it's the Hatch Podcast series. A vacant lot, once overlooked and forgotten amid the rush of urban life, now pulses with vibrant life. Flowers bloom where concrete once stood, vegetables sprout in neglected corners, and hope takes root in every crack. Yet, even these transformed spaces remain fragile, vulnerable to neglect, gentrification, or future development that could erase their resurgence. Similarly, rural farmland faces its own challenges: fragile soils, unpredictable weather, and razor-thin margins that make farming a constant gamble. While innovative crops like perennial wheat show promise for creating more resilient, sustainable agriculture, reducing the need for replanting and conserving water, convincing farmers to take risks with such unproven techniques remains a significant hurdle. It's a story of resilience, rooted in the earth and driven by community spirit, connecting urban renewal with rural perseverance in the shared pursuit of food security and sustainability. Today, we're sharing stories of communities confronting climate change, dismantling systemic barriers, and working tirelessly to ensure equitable access to healthy food, because food security is fundamental to a thriving society. I'm Tate Chamberlain, joined by Nancy Williams, founder of No More Empty Pots, Rachel Strower, president of the Land Institute, and Miranda Miller-Klugeschers, executive director of the Kansas Food Action Network. Together, we'll reflect on personal experiences, systemic issues, and the collective power driving meaningful change. We're at Arbor Day Farms in Nebraska. Join us, won't you? What causes someone not to have food?
So many reasons.
Yeah. I was like, where do we start?
Yeah.
I think the person you're talking to is, the person you're talking about. Is it in the United States or is it, globally? I think Rachel probably knows more about global food systems issues than I do. I don't know about you, Nancy.
I know some in context because I try to think in terms of humanity when I think about how I'm existing and what I do in the world at this time. But I think it really is, it's interesting when you talk to a person about why they may not have food, and when you talk to a person who works in food systems about why they may not have food. I think it's super important to make sure that you are speaking with people so that you know how you are addressing their food insecurity versus just recognizing that someone doesn't have food and then getting them what you have available. Because in my experience, some people they have access to food, but they don't have access to the food that they need for their health and nutrition. When we have seniors who contact us at No More Empty Pots because they're looking for food and they say, I could go to the pantry, but when I eat that, it causes health problems. And then I have to then deal with more medication or possibly a doctor's visit, which then takes even more money. And so they recognize that and they choose not to consume that food because they don't want the downstream impact of that consumption. And they're working diligently to get access to something that's going to actually nourish them versus just meet the caloric need. I didn't quite answer the question fully about what makes people not have food. There are a lot of many factors that contribute to that.
Yeah. And I think that it's really context dependent. So the organization I lead, we, oversee a network of Kansas's, 30-something food, farm, and policy councils, as well as like a whole host of health and wellness coalitions. And, the work we do is helping the local coalitions and the councils address their food systems issues in their community. And it is entirely community dependent. And, what we found, even across the state of Kansas, which I think, most people look at Kansas and think, oh, it's super homogenous, so what could be the difference? But we have 105 counties. And I can tell you that in every one of the communities we work with, the root causes of why someone cannot access food or why the vast majority of their population is struggling to access food is entirely different. You're going to have there's going to be transportation issues in rural communities where you might be able to grow your food like Nancy does. But, in more urban spaces, it might have, not just transportation issues, but, systems issues anywhere from, yeah, sure, I can get to the grocery store, but I can't afford what it is. Or in more sprawled out communities, it's, the grocery store is on the other side of a town and there's zero public transportation. And so you have to own a car. And that's just physical access. We're not even talking about, financial access. And then, of course, like what Nancy mentioned, nutritional access. So, to what you said, Nancy, we really, because of my background as, a SNAP alum and someone who came from a food insecure household, I really encourage, and I love that the space, like the food security movement as a whole is moving into more of this like lived experience space where we're compensating people with lived experience for sharing their expertise. But I think there's a difference between sharing your expertise and actually allowing someone a seat at the table and saying, okay, so these are answering what they're telling you is the problem, right? So, I think as a whole, and I loved what you said about the food systems, movement, like we have a tendency to, set priorities based on what we around our table think is the problem in our community. And then when we pull in people with lived experience, oftentimes it's just for appearance sake. And then we don't end up doing anything systems or policy wise to address the challenges because those aren't what they tell us isn't easy. It's not easy to address someone's, because when we work on food systems issues, we want to, we want to do food drives and things like that rather than saying, oh, well, maybe you have financial access, but you live in a part of town where it is unsafe for you to walk to the grocery store at 11 p.m. or 12 p.m., whatever, 12 a.m., whatever time you get off of your, third shift, job.
Amen.
Yeah, exactly. And, what is, so is it really that we're working on food access, or is it like working on food access oftentimes has nothing to do with food, but creating the system and the culture and the space where people can access that food?
Absolutely.
And yeah.
A different lens, maybe.
Yeah.
We have food insecure households and food insecure communities. And arguably, over the longer term, it's definitely starting now, but over the longer term, we also have sort of a food insecure species.
Yes.
And so when I think of the reasons that people don't have food, I think of floods and drought, climate change sort of broadly, water shortages, soil loss, war, social unrest, these kinds of global things that impact the large production systems that so many humans depend on. That's certainly where we're focused, is on grain agriculture, which is, the war in Ukraine has shown us the sort of fragility of our international trade and how that's impacted wheat and how it's impacted hunger in Africa and other places that depend on those grains for sustenance. And you see farmers all over the world, subsistence farmers, mostly impacted by climate change.
Yes.
They are mostly women who cannot feed their families and communities because they can no longer grow crops because of intense heat or lack of water and these kinds of things. Yeah. The third way people don't have access to food is the issue is manyfold as well on this. This is a situation where climate change, which is something that is impacted by other whole industries, the fossil fuel industry, our growing interest and need for energy supply, and the way that we supply it is impacting our ability to grow food on a global scale. So they're intertwined, and you kind of can't solve one without the other.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So given, you're developing a new kind of grain that will have to be grown by farmers across the world. And in order to convince them to do that, I just assume that you have to probably explain to them why it's important to move that way. What is it like for you to have conversations with traditional farmers about climate change? Do you find that they are accepting of the idea? Or, what does that look like? Because they're the ones that are feeling the impacts most directly.
We just call it C2, climate change. so that they don't know what we're talking about? I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I'm kidding. It's a joke. That's a joke.
Doesn't work.
What's C2 mean?
Climate change.
CC.
C2. Got it. Yeah. C squared.
Yeah,
C
okay.
squared. Yeah. C squared. That would have been more. I think that a lot of times the conversation is as much about soil. For farmers, their biggest asset is the land and the soil that they're on. And they have a sense that they're losing, that it's being lost. And to give them tools to not lose it and to sustain it and to regenerate it is usually, for the most part, a no-brainer. And I think when it gets down to it, a lot of farmers do feel trapped in the system of depletion and chemical application and the expense of that, but also the expense physically and in terms of their health.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like we tend to think that, well, farmers just want to do, especially in the US, they just want to do it the way they've always done it. And they do, but they are also confronted with floods and drought, and that is impacting, and soil loss, and that's impacting not only their asset into the future, but their actual livelihoods this year or next year.
Yeah.
So they might not believe in the political notion of climate change, but they know that something's different.
Yeah.
Right.
And that it's harder to grow the food that they've taken pride in growing for the community or the world over their time.
Yeah. And they're faced with a system that is wholly unflexible. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
There's only one option.
Yeah. Well, one of the topics I hosted was the heart of the heartland, and we were talking about the threshold of risk taking that farmers have. They're on such a tight margin that if they make a wrong decision in their risk, that they'll lose their farm. Yeah.
There's so many things connected to that. One, you can see, I worked in the crop protection chemical side of production agriculture 7-8 years. So I saw who was being successful and who was struggling and how that changed in just a span of a decade. It shifted really quickly. And those who started to adopt no-till practices and now who have adopted cover crops see a much different return. Regenerative agriculture is showing much more promise in being able to support fewer inputs and get greater yield, plus have a bigger environmental impact. The other part of that is farmers, when you're talking about a wrong turn and how the risk taking could go into losing farms. And a thing that I don't hear people talking about a lot, except in some smaller circles. I used to serve with North Central Region SARE, Sustainable Ag Research and Education. And we had sociologists and folks who really focused on the mental health, wellness, and community of farmers. And what does that take? Because farmers are a large percentage of death by suicide. A lot of people don't realize that there is a really large mental health impact for this type of livelihood. It takes a toll. And there's one other group in some data that I've read that is close to farmers in that space, and that is young Black boys. It is a thing that they have in common as a high level of death by suicide.
really?
Yes.
I think it's interesting. That is certainly part of it. And one of the things I like about the idea of the perennial grain future is that by being a perennial, one of the things that the farmer achieves is time, and ideally also resilience over time and to changes in the climate and in the environment, and just changes happen every year.
Yes.
We're kind of focused on climate change, and it is creating a more intense and more frequent event cycle. But just even today, right, without climate change, there are years where there's a crop failure.
Yes.
And we kind of forget about that because we have, I think, most people live in cities.
Yes.
most people, and especially people who do have access to healthy food and grocery stores or farmers market, are accustomed to getting what they get every time they go. Mm-hmm. So we have developed a sort of technological expectation of something that is based on a biological, ecological system that changes every year.
Yeah.
You know, when you don't get to plan, we deal with this with the scientists and the research at the Land Institute. You know, when are we going to have this all staff meeting, right? Well, we're not sure exactly when the kernza is going to be harvested.
Exactly.
Is it going to be on the 12th or the 15th?
Yes.
And then it rains or it's hot and you got to delay it or you have to rush to do it.
Yes.
And that is the world that farmers live in. But the expectation and the pressure on them is to fulfill their contract, which is exactly the same amount of the product year over year over year.
Yes.
So it's a stressful thing. And you're dealing with so many unknowns.
Yes.
And nature.
And that's in production agriculture, when you're talking about small farmers who are producing food for immediate human consumption, there are even more variables.
Exactly.
And the education of consumers and eaters learning that it's a seasonal thing. And you don't get strawberries year round in Nebraska or the Midwest unless they are shipped in from somewhere else. And so you may not have many fruits in your CSA because we don't grow them here. And then to reset expectations, but also helping people learn how to use what is available, because we do have things in abundance. We just don't have all of the things that they may be accustomed to having abundance. And so it's a shift for everybody. But if we start to talk in systems and teach in systems and learn in systems and have empathy in systems so that the consumer and the eater understands better what the farmer and the producer is going through to even provide that. It's not like a magic produce fairy that's dropping food somewhere. Like somebody is growing it. Yeah. And if that food production is aligned with our values, there are a group of people engaged in this process that are likely not being supported in the way that they can so that they can consistently do this work. And to me, we have to consider all of these factors in a system in order for it to be sustainable, resilient, and equitable.
I think that was something that we saw following, right at the immediate onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes. I mean, honestly, never before since the Great Depression has so much attention been paid to our food system. And across the country, people were for the first time understanding the wholeness of the system itself and how supply chain disruption can impact what you have access to. I mean, like you were saying, people are used to going to the grocery store and being able to get exactly what they want any time of year. And the biggest barrier for the vast majority of Americans is the grocery store open. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. And, there's this shift almost to prioritizing local because that's what folks can have access to. But there's this uproar across the nation that we saw when, especially in Kansas, we saw pigs being slaughtered and just going to waste because their contracts are set up in such a way that those pigs, that the producer of the pigs has a contract where the pigs get processed in a certain way for a certain use, whether it's restaurants or grocery stores or, what have you. And if that contract has been disrupted, they don't have a way to just get those pigs out to whomever needs it. And so many people are like, well, if people are hungry, then why are we just, letting pigs go to waste or letting, grain rot? And it was astounding, I think, for those of us who were in the food system to be like, this is what we were talking about. This is what we've been talking about. But for the vast majority of the American population, and I'm willing to bet the world, people don't know where our food comes from and how fragile that system is. And we had the opportunity following COVID-19 to make those changes.
And we're still in it.
Yep.
And we depend on it for something that we need
Yes.
to survive.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's a design flaw because the system is operating exactly the way that we designed it. And the people that are most impacted by it, most vulnerable, they're the first ones to feel the negative impacts when anything goes wrong.
But that goes to what you were saying about having people with lived experience as a part of developing policies and the components of a system so that it is mindful of the conditions that need to be met for everyone to have access to what they need to thrive.
And it's not just people, when we talk about people with lived experience, my focus is primarily in people who are experiencing food insecurity for any number of reasons. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about lived experience, we're also talking about pulling in farmers and asking them, what changes do we need to make to a system that not only that your livelihood depends on, but that you are the main driver of? Without farmers, we would have nothing. But I'm willing to bet that in most of these conversations, I know at least across the state of Kansas, farmers are so busy that they often don't sit at the table with the community organizations that are working to make these changes. And, I don't know. How often do you guys speak to farmers about what it is that they need?
Quite a lot. We have a lot of farmers who have just organically come to the Land Institute and said, I want this. And so they are in many ways early research partners in the work. And then we learn back from them what their experience is and how, what kind of additional research they need to be successful or where are they failing. One of the challenges with that is that the farmers who can afford to take a portion of their productive acres out of corn and soybean or wheat and do this experimental thing that might be more likely to fail the other and has an unclear market and doesn't yield as much. It's more of a specialty crop. That group of people are the people who own land, have a lot of it, have been farming for a long time. And so it's primarily white, old, multi-generational farmers with multi-generational wealth who have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because then there's still a group that's not at the table.
Right.
So
Right.
There is a group of farmers at the table.
Yeah.
But it's a very specific group of farmers at the table. And we've done work to try and remedy that. And you can to an extent, but it's challenging. So.
Yeah.
Like what you were saying, the margins are so small. There is a reason that across the heartland, in Kansas specifically, only 9% of the crops that we grow are actually viable for human consumption. There's a reason that we call the crops that are viable for human consumption specialty crops, because commodity crops predictable, and it's more predictable, I guess I should say. There's nothing predictable in agriculture. And the margins are so much greater on specialty crops are much more narrow. The margins on specialty crops are much more narrow than on commodity crops.
The margins are narrow everywhere.
Exactly. Sure. Everything, because we don't appropriately value food and what it takes to get food in this system. There's a lot of opportunity for rebalancing the system for food with the components that it takes to have a resilient, equitable system. I don't think that it's so much about knowing, so I'm going to change how I'm stating this. It's where do we want to take the risk, and how much courage and chutzpah can we pull forth to take that risk, because it's unknown. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is what we're doing now isn't working for everybody. And even the ones that we think is working for, it's only working for them on a certain level. It's not a full stack, it's not a full stack opportunity of value and consistency where they can do the same thing that they're doing now in perpetuity and pass that on. We know it's just not how it is. And especially with the economics of it, it's not appropriately valued anywhere. Part of the issue that I think I see when we talk about full value, I think is full value accounting, and I'm not pulling up the right terms right now. But
full cost accounting.
There we go.
Hey.
Full cost accounting is accounting for all of what it takes to produce a thing. And right now there's some people, some components, some actors in the system are shouldering an unfair burden of what this system costs to be what it is right now.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, we need to do something daring and make, risky attempts at change. But I mean, it's easy for us sitting around the table. I am not a farmer. But it's easy to say that when you're not, your livelihood does not depend on, the outputs every single year.
But they already know that.
Oh, yeah.
I think the things that we can do, like as individuals and as folks leading organizations is assess the resources that we do have and how do we leverage those to, one, make this a more equitable space, but also hold space for some of that risk for them. So talk to people. And we come up with, okay, this is what we can afford to do now. This is what I'm going to bring to the table. What can you bring? And then together we have this collective action on this is what we can do right now and see if we can move the ball down the field a little farther until we get to a place where you either said for a field goal or touchdown or extra point conversion. I like all the wins we can get.
Rachel, was it you yesterday that was talking about how it's the new generation of farmers that are more likely to take those risks as far as like adapting some kind of new practices?
It wasn't me,
but
okay. I can speak to that. I think, maybe that's true. I don't know if I would say that I've seen that. If it's a statistic, then it's true. But I've seen all generations of farmers involved and interested. The older generation also cares about the land and the soil, and they want and they know that their children have seen the dead end lifestyle that farming is. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of something that would change their children's mind about being on the farm or their grandchildren's mind about being on the farm is of interest. So I don't know that I would go down necessarily a road of, the old stodgy ones are the least likely to change.
Please don't think that's what I'm saying.
But there is certainly, I think there's more energy in younger farmers to try innovative things and do things differently. So I think that's definitely true.
I really enjoyed getting into the food desert versus food apartheid. Can we lean into that a little?
I won't get as worked up this time. Nancy, do you want to take that one?
This is the moment.
Oh my God. The people I hear speaking about food deserts glean onto it because it's an easy way to describe what we're seeing across the heartland, which is a lack of physical access to grocery stores or food retail in general. And my problem with that definition, and I would love to hear Nancy's take on this, is that, the concept of desert makes it sound like it's just naturally occurring, like grocery stores just pop up out of, the prairie, like corn or like apple trees or something like that.
Thing to manifest,
yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
I want all the podcast listeners to know that they're missing Nancy rolling her eyes. It's a brilliant thing.
She's like physically restraining herself. But it's true. It's, that is not how food retail, that's not how anything in the food system works. None of this is naturally occurring. This is a human designed system that we have been operating under for
too long.
Too long. That's a great way to put it. From my perspective, which I think is predominantly rural, because I know you operate in more of an urban space, like the food system, like everything else, is inherently racist because it's been designed by people who lead in all other spaces in the world. And it's been designed for the top lines, the vast majority. And inevitably, when we design systems that are not targeted at helping the least of us, that are not designed at addressing the needs of the least of these or the weakest link, when we look at systems that are, just designed to address the needs of the few instead of the many, what we end up with are systems that leave people out in a violent way. We have, I could wax romantically about the number of ways that, grocery stores across Kansas are just dying, in small towns across Kansas. The Rural Grocery Initiative is an initiative at Kansas State University, which is doing amazing work to help, maintain those small grocery stores, in ways that just allow people to have access to food when the closest, big box chain or what have you is hundreds of miles away. There are unique forms anywhere from, the city owns the local grocery store and it is considered a public good in the same way that utilities are, which is, that's a whole other conversation.
Listen, we need some fresh produce more than we need some light.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's, I can speak to the small towns and the way that has worked out. But it's also, we talk a lot about, how Dollar Generals are just coming in and, oftentimes push out the smaller chain stores, or the mom and pop stores, but oftentimes they're not placed in ways that are accessible. I'll give you an example. So Crawford County, Kansas, in the southeast portion of the state, is one of the poorer regions in the state. There is a large population in that area that is elderly, disabled, socioeconomically disenfranchised. And the classic example is they have the town Arma, which is, I want to say it's 9 miles away from the closest grocery store, which the federal food desert definition starts at 10 miles.
Yes.
So they're like a mile away. Yeah, right. Only 10 miles, which think about, the communities across.
You're going to walk 10 miles?
Listen,
right.
Are you going to walk 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, or 4, or
with
3,
no
or 2?
You're not going to get far.
We're not going to walk more than 2 miles.
No, I think that's
10?
pushing it.
10 is too many.
Yeah, and think about the weather in the
another
heartland or
checkbox of things to address in the system design.
Yeah.
In regards to climate, should people be living in the forest or areas without water, or should they be moving into places that have this? I feel like humanity has this tendency to live in places that they shouldn't.
So,
like on the coast.
Then there's this unaccounted humanitarian effort that has no budget to help them out when they get into disaster.
There's a Pandora's box too.
Yeah. I'm going to push back
That's why
hard
he
on
goes
that.
here.
Good.
Right? Because technically we all want some land that ain't ours. so.
Yeah. I wasn't even going to go there, but I'll let Nancy.
But it's just access to resources.
Right.
Colorado ships the Colorado River to California.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think that there's just something to think about as we think about redesigning a food system that is in rhythm with natural processes and temperatures and rainfalls and these kinds of things. I think always about, when humans migrate since, for tens of thousands of years across the globe, where do they find themselves? Right. Well, near water, near food.
Yes.
That's happening naturally and easily provided by nature and contemporary sunlight and clean water and these things. Mm-hmm. And so there is something to be said about habitating.
Yes.
What would the word be? Habitating is not a word.
Yeah, habitating.
Habitating. I like it.
But habitat is, so let's write it down.
But to locate ourselves intentionally in places that are naturally abundant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. But to offer the counterpoint, we're looking at communities. That's wonderful. If you have the financial, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the social capacity to move yourself wherever things are. Most of the people that we are talking about don't have the ability to just move themselves down under and build a bunker or whatever, because that's where they feel safe and warm and fuzzy. Mm. We're talking about, going back to what I was saying about Crawford County, these are folks that have lived there for generations. They want to live there. They have chosen to live there. Leaves.
Yeah.
And, well, it didn't leave. It was pushed out by a Dollar General that was set up on the other side of a highway from where the population lives. The population that is majority disabled and elderly. And what we ended up seeing, people crossing a highway in motorized wheelchairs just to access their food at the Dollar General. I mean, like, that is a problem.
So if you imagine that as a habitat and you have animals in a habitat going to the source for sustenance, I mean, that is what's going to happen.
Right.
But it is like the food system is a component of larger ecosystem design. And if we think more holistically, not just for a resilient, sustainable, equitable food system, but a resilient, equitable, sustainable ecosystem that we all live in as a part of humanity with the built environment and everything else, all of this stuff would be in balance. And city planning would not allow the Dollar General to set up across the street and not be in community with the people. They may not have even allowed the store to be there because it doesn't fit the overall goals that you need for humanity, the population in that area. So I feel, because I don't know enough about all of the detail, but I feel that we don't consider all of the components of what it takes to be alive and to thrive, and that we see our narrow portion and we just dig into that and we have our idea of what it should be. And we are not in a growth mindset, and we are not thinking of what it takes for other beings to be in community with us. And so we end up with policies and then policies to counteract policies, and then people behaving in a certain way where we still need then more policies because those policies, like, they found a loophole, so they aren't doing it the way that we thought they were. It's so freaking exhausting. Meanwhile, everything is still not balanced and people are still suffering unnecessarily.
The local food systems movement gets a lot of flack. And I think, it's easy to look at the local food systems movement and think, oh, it's farmers markets and, the fuzzy, warm, like, higher socioeconomic status work. But I mean, at the Kansas Food Action Network, we prioritize working in communities because, first and foremost, if we're going to make changes that can impact a local food system, it has to start at the community level and it has to be driven there. Statewide policy, federal policy is not equipped to address the nuances of a town of 5,000 people, 2,000 people, 200 people in Kansas. And the people who know what needs to happen are the people that live within that community. And it's just like, how do we firmly believe that food systems change has to start at the community level. And then we can, elevate policies that everyone across the state agrees with, absolutely, to, move in a collective direction. But addressing on a community by community base is the most effective way, we believe, to create well-being for everyone, because it does create these strong communities that allow people to work codependently on each other, and creates a strong sense of belonging that people want to continue to work on. When you live in a place, you feel connected to it and you want to make your lives better.
I love this idea that, Nancy, that we designed it. Like, we're living in our own, kennel. Yes. We're sitting in our own shit.
The fucking lock already.
Right? And
what a visual.
And so we can change it.
Yes.
Just stop.
Yes.
And so that's what I think is sometimes so frustrating, is that we've layered, part of me, we talk about how entrenched and powerful and layered and complicated this thing we have created is, this thing called society. And we can't accept that we could just stop and start over. Because we have so much hubris and ego about what we've created.
Yes.
So
it's interesting.
Is it that
we're blind.
Or just tired. It's so massive. The food system is huge. And I mean, just in this conversation, we talk about, yeah, sure, we can access, like, what would it take for people to access food? But then you can go down several different rabbit holes and it just becomes so big and so complex. And it's so easy for people to feel paralyzed.
Yeah. What are some tangible bites to get us going in the right direction?
One thing that I believe and what I've witnessed and what I love to be a part of is when people get to be together. So like tables with food and people who would not usually talk to each other. So farmers and consumers and eaters, like everybody together that are a part of a thing, but may not have a chance to talk to each other. Because every time that I'm in spaces like that, there's like these aha moments where one person is going, oh, I didn't know that that's how you see it. Well, this is how it is for me. And then the other person going, well, oh, if that's what you need, all I have to do is just do this thing. And it's like you're doing it in unison with each other, supporting each other. We have the resources. Sometimes we want to do a thing, but we don't know how to do a thing. But instead of us with our fierce independence and intellectualizing things, and I say this because this is something that I'm working through in my own life and personage, is to take a beat and talk to somebody that is not the same person that I always talk to, somebody different, so I can get a different perspective and see, what am I bringing to this that is contributing to the thing that I don't want to see? And then how do I, in empathy, change my behavior so that I am now supporting the other person or persons in this circle so that we all get what we need? And instead of it being harder, it's actually easier because it's less stressful and there's fewer unknowns because we've decided to share with each other what we need and to collectively harness the resources to elevate all of our living.
And see where the overlaps are.
Yeah.
Is there enough room for everyone to have a plot of land? I feel like true
Everybody
environmentalists.
don't want a plot of land.
I know, but so where should people live? If they live in a city, whose responsibility is it to feed them? Or should we all move back into like rural areas and grow our own food?
I wouldn't frame it that way. But that's my perspective.
Say more.
Well, I think that we have to be in community with each other. I may not be the best person to grow the food because I may not be out there checking, make sure the water is done, harvesting is done. I may be better in the kitchen or in a space where it's processing and preparing the food. I think that we should think of our living in an ecosystem like trees and animals and other things because we all have something to contribute. We all have something to share and to give. We all have something that lights us up inside. It's not all the same thing. And so saying that we all should go to one place or another, we all should do one thing or another, I think it's not considering the synergy and the power in the collective. That I think that if we bring what we can to it and decide collectively, what is the best way for us to maximize what we bring to this, what we have, what the resources are, so that we all get what we need with less work, more rest, and live the way that we want to live. So it's hard for me to wrap my head around we should all go this place or that place because we have to see each other and be empathetic to ourselves first and then to each other. Because if we just migrate to a place with the same bullshit that we're doing, we're just going to have the same bullshit in a different place.
I guess I'm asking should cities exist if they can't feed themselves?
I don't think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, so in a disaster scenario, food access only lasts for 4 days?
Depends. Because you have urban lots. You have ways to grow food.
But not for millions of people.
But it's not the city's fault. It's the system we've designed that has made it so that we exist in that capacity. I mean, it's not the city's fault. It's not the people that choose to live in urban areas. It's not it's their responsibility to build the infrastructure so that living there is sustainable if they want to continue living there. But it is not our place to tell people, like, you can't live there. I mean, I live in rural Kansas. I don't want more people there. I love where I live. But I'm also, a part of, but I mean, also, getting to what Nancy was saying, it is our responsibility to, as a community, come together and create the infrastructure that makes life there sustainable wherever you live. And that's going to look vastly different.
So what if the answer was yeah? Yeah. I mean, we should disengage cities and we should mandate that no more than... I once had somebody come to me with this wild idea about how we could live sustainably in groups of like 250,000 or something. And so their vision was for these pods of 250,000 people. What would that look like? I mean, I don't think it would look unlike...
It looked like what I'm talking about. It's a distributed network.
Yeah, so that's possible. I think there's food. I'd like to think that if we can get sustainability or resilience right in food, then we can get it right in other areas. But the idea that the efficiencies of a city, I mean, from an energy perspective, if we're going to have 8 billion people or 10 billion people, it's probably not a bad idea for them to be concentrated. And the question then becomes, how radical are you going to be and what the right concentration is? And what we're not touching, so just to take it another step, what we're not touching is, and this is a question that comes up when you're talking about the global scale, not really as much at the local scale. How many people is the right number of people?
Well,
like population wise,
like global population, because how many planets do we use currently? There's this group that measures this.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about, but
it's an impossible conversation to have because no
one really knows.
You're not gonna. Nobody wants to regulate how many children you can have or start like some weird.
Except for China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you need to. If you just look at, if you look at a natural ecosystem, it has predators in it. And so it is that balance that, especially when it comes to animals, that they balance themselves out one way or another. But I tend to, even though I am an animal, I tend to refer to trees because they have this synergistic, symbiotic way of existing where there's always room. There's always enough. There is a cycle that is natural enough that supports whatever the population is. And I believe if we stop trying to intellectualize those things and allowed the system, because these organic bodies don't last forever. They are going to go away. And I think that rhythm, there are a whole bunch of things that we are interjecting into the system that has more or less people one way or the other, or less animals one way or the other. But I think if we just allowed a natural ecosystem, the question wouldn't be about how many and where, because naturally it would work, it would happen, and it would be interesting. Maybe there's a simulation for this. I've never done Sims. I can't stand that game. But maybe there's something like that where you can see like some population experiment to see, okay, how does this play out? What does happen? Do you end up with like pods of people distributed geographically?
But let it happen organically.
Exactly.
Pun intended.
Exactly.
What brings you hope?
This podcast.
All these mics, these mics that I bought with capitalism and money.
Listen, that is
the smell of
plastic.
Yeah. This is what we have now. I believe that if we had a different system, these could be made of like mushrooms and stuff like that. There are natural conductive materials. There are things. So I don't think we have to give up the innovation. I just think that the materials may change.
I also think that right now, it might be important to broadcast this kind of conversation to a broad audience so that they understand that this kind of conversation can happen, are inspired. But I also think that they're in the future. I imagine a future where people are just having this conversation, and it doesn't need to be broadcasted because everyone's doing it.
Right. Yeah.
And they're digging deep and getting rooted to each other in the way that we are here.
Yeah. Or to go one step further, that the conversation isn't even necessary because that's
just happening.
That's like, why isn't it just the default?
The thing that gives me hope is just being here. But I think you asked about how do I not stress out about this? Because I used to. It's not that I'm not concerned and I don't stress about some things, but I had some health scares and really had to decide, how am I going to live? Am I going to say, it was a good run? Let's just ride this out with what I'm doing. Or do I want to be here to experience more of it? I literally had to make that decision because of the indicators that I had was that my body could not sustain how I was choosing to live. And I shared that with my kids and they were like, no, you have to be here. We want you. I was like, y'all are self-sufficient. I ain't really got much to do with y'all. I don't really have much more to do. And they encouraged me to change. But what really happened is when I got to a place where I started to love myself. And when I had that experience of literally just 2 years ago, I've been keeping a journal almost daily since 2016. And last year was the first year where I wrote, I appreciate me and I love myself. The first time. Wow. And I was like, wow. And then when I started doing for myself what I thought I was doing for other people, I use this term like my heart is now open. It opens up. And there are times now, and it was scary, and it still is sometimes, because I don't like rejection and working through all of that stuff. But now I'm just like walking around with my heart open, like just scanning for where are the other open hearts and where can I like match up and have that exchange? Because once I experienced love and belonging and joy in that way, like I'm like the sky has always looked like this. Like sunsets, sunrises, that shit happens every day almost. Like you can see some days it's cloudy, but it's still happening. Just because I can't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening. And getting into that space where the work is not what I thought it was. It's not the checklist. It's not getting the things done. That's a responsibility that I've accepted. But the work is being. Whatever this moment is the moment. This is the journey. And that's how I don't stress out about it anymore. I trust that where I am is where I'm supposed to be. And I set that intention and try to call in all of the forces that I can so that I'm in the right place at the right time for the right reason, being as I need to be. And that in that moment, whatever I'm here for, the exchange that needs to happen with whomever or whatever is around me is the thing that I need. And it's the thing that they need and that I continue to be until I am not. And then I'm on to the next thing.
My hope is, I'm going to phrase it like this. It's sort of similar, I think, to Nancy's, is that we're just temporarily not soil.
I love that.
Yes. Like that?
Yes.
And I'm so thankful for having come from soil, and I'm looking forward
to return.
And I want to live this time in honor of that. And so that's, I guess, what gives me hope today.
This is the Hatch Podcast. Nancy, Rachel, Miranda, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at Arbor Day Farms. I'm Tate Chamberlain. What we've seen today is a powerful reminder. When communities come together, rooted in land, driven by hope, remarkable change is possible. These stories are more than just moments of renewal. They are a testament to resilience, justice, and the unbreakable human spirit. As we move forward, it's clear that the future of our food depends on our ability to listen, to act with intention, and to hold ourselves accountable. Progress isn't about quick fixes or empty promises. It's about sustained effort, thoughtful innovation, and a collective commitment to justice. Every step we take towards a more equitable food system is a step towards a healthier, more resilient world. The work continues, and it demands our continued attention and resolve. Music for Dispatch from the Heartland is by Gangsta Grass, an electrifying blend of bluegrass and hip-hop that captures the spirit of the Heartland. Stay tuned. Later in this series, we'll delve deeper into Gangsta Grass's story and their unique sound in our full episode. Don't miss it.
Trust me, son. Rebel, no pauses. Taking out your forces with a switchblade and a rusty gun. Doing this forever, you've just begun. Don't start none. It won't be none.
It seems now more than ever that we have found ourselves on the cusp of monumental worldwide change. Whether we consider the environment, politics, infrastructure, health, economics, or inequities across a broad swath of social constructs, the consensus is clear and urgent. All is not as it should be. The United Nations, a consortium of 193 member states from around the globe, agrees. In 2015, the UN unanimously adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. These goals call for urgent action and global partnership to secure peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future.
In alignment with the SDGs, Hatch, a curated network of artists, activists, and entrepreneurs working together to accelerate positive global change, has partnered with I Am Interchange to fuse adventure journalism with experiential design labs to develop innovative solutions to complex global challenges. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoy it, please subscribe or leave us a rating. This episode was produced by Yara Craner, Susan Karstensen, and me, Tate Chamberlain. A shout out to our media and production team, Jessica Byerly, Darko Sevilla, Jacob Desch, Sean Mackinson, Amin Yarsu, and Zane Giordano. With so much gratitude to the Hatch supporters, Steelcase, the Kauffman Foundation, the Gwydion Fund, Envision Equality, the Hatch Volunteers, Board of Directors, Hatch Guardians, and the community who help make this work and mission possible. To learn more about Hatch, visit hatchexperience.org. Building community could not happen without food. And with that, I'd like to thank Whistle Pig Korean, Red Tractor Pizza, and Zocalo Coffee House. Do you have an issue that's riddled by gridlock in your community? Shoot me an email at tate@iaminterchange.org. That's tate@iaminterchange.org. Remember, share airtime and don't ruin dinner.